Hi and welcome to this free tutorial of a watercolour zebra that I'm going to show you how to do today using minimalist equipment. You won't need much, and if it is that you do need to purchase things, it shouldn't break the bank when doing so. So this is a picture we're going to paint. So this is my original reference photo. This is a picture I took recently on a trip I was fortunate enough to go on with the lovely Sarah Stokes. If you haven't seen her work, do go and check her out. Her work is fabulous. And it was an artist retreat that she held in South Africa at the Kareka Game Reserve, which is again amazing, so do go and check that out as well. And this is one of the zebra photographs that I took while we were there. So being as though I'm currently off recovering from surgery, I thought I'd get this videoed in prep just in case I wasn't able to go live. So if you're watching this, it means that I'm not quite on the road to recovery just yet, but I still don't want you to miss out on a bit of a free tutorial. So the reason I'm doing this is because I normally teach watercolour beginner classes at Plesley Pit in Mansfield. And unfortunately my class can't go ahead because of my recovery, so I thought why not give you guys a taste of what one of my sessions looks like. So I'll go through everything that we're going to need to complete this. If you have signed up to receive the notifications of this tutorial, you will have already been sent this directly along with the line art to be able to draw it out and how to any instructions on how to draw your line art out, which I have got just here in front of me. So I'm just going to pop that picture out the way. So I've already drawn my line art out. I've used an A5 piece of paper. Again, you can use any size that you prefer to, and I'm using 300 GSM Winsor & Newton cotton paper, sorry, and then we've got the Winsor & Newton range paints as well. Things you're going to need. So we've got some masking tape, so I'm going to mask this down in just a moment. As you work with watercolours, if it's your first time, you will notice that paper will ruffle. The thinner the paper, the bigger the ruffling, and you don't want that bowedness to take over your piece because it can affect it. So that's why we've got some masking paper to stretch it out. We've also got two types of brushes. I've just gone for generic one medium, one thin brush. So I've gone with a size 5 and this lovely rigger brush, which is fantastic for detailing, and those pesky smaller stripes that we're going to come across. The bigger the picture you are, the easier you'll probably find it. So those two size brushes. The paint I've decided to go with is the lamp black. I've chosen lamp black because it's a gorgeous translucent black, and it's got some really, really nice bluey grey tones, which for a zebra is absolutely fantastic. So that's the colour, and the only colour that we're going to be using watercolour wise is this one. We've also got a mixing palette. You could use a saucer, a plate, anything, completely whatever you have accessible to yourself. And I have 2 pots of water, one clean, one dirty. I'll explain those as we go through as to what they're for. So I have done my line art like I said, and you will notice I have coloured a couple of those, especially in the smaller, tighter areas, just to give me a couple of landmark areas as to where the dark stripes are versus the white stripes. Optional extras, if you fancy including them, I've got a waterproof fine liner and a white gel pen. They are fantastic for any extra details at the end. So for this piece I am going to show you how to do a rough background. So we've got just a little bit of something going on the back. This is actually trees in the back, not clouds or anything. So it's completely up to yourself. If you want to make it look like clouds, absolutely go for it. But I'm just going to pop a bit of pigment on the page so that it doesn't look lost in the centre. If I wasn't going to go and do the background, I'll probably do some playful splashes, but I thought this is actually going to be a great way to get started if you've never done watercolour before. For those of you who have done it before, this is going to be a great learning exercise for you because it's all in one colour. So it's really, really going to help you work out tonal values and things like that, which is absolutely a great tool when you are an artist. So what I'm currently doing, I've just ripped off 2 strips of masking tape, and I'm actually just sticking them to myself at the moment on my clothes, just because this is a new roll of masking tape and there is every possibility that it may try and tear the paper. Again, the thinner the paper, the easier it will tear. So just be conscious of that when we remove these at the end. So I'm just going to strap mine at the bottom and again at the top. Here we go. Perfect. So I've just realised I've not drawn my horizon line in on this one, so I'm just going to quickly mark out whereabouts I think that's going to be. So it's going to be there, just because I want a bit of a variance between the ground and what's going on in the background. Can't even tell if that's straight, you know. That'll do. Well, so let's have a look, check that we are all lined up in the right position. And let's crack on. So I have got a scrap piece of paper that I use for testing out paints as well. That's always handy to have nearby. And I have got some tissue somewhere hiding from me, just in case I need to remove any, if I have too much water on my paintbrush. But hopefully I'll be able to explain everything as we go. Brilliant. So first thing I'm going to do is dispense some paint. Now you may already have the half pans version of this. Both work exactly the same. It's just that obviously you have to activate the half pans, which look something like this. I've got one nearby. So this is my normal paint set that I use, and it looks quite messy because it's used all the time. So these are what half pans look like. To activate these, you would just wet them and then use them as I'm going to show you just now with the wet ones. So first thing I want to do is pop some of that into my palette just there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the background and get something on there so that we know what we're working with. So the darker tones on this background are definitely the foreground, but what I'm going to do to begin with is just get some colour down across the whole area. So I am going to wet the whole of the background, avoiding the zebra. And to do that, it's just, I'm going to use my clean water. Let's check I've got my clean and my dirty water on screen so you can see. So this is going to be my clean water. That can be interchangeable because sometimes I do forget, and it becomes even more impossible when there is a drink nearby, but thankfully I've put my drink right over there so it's not going to get in the way. So I'm using my large brush. Depending on how hot it is where you are, your paper may dry out quickly. I have got a fan on me at the moment because it is a little bit warm in my studio, so there is every possibility, and my brush is still a little bit dirty from my previous painting, there is every possibility that it may dry out, which is absolutely fine. We can work with it. So I'm going to start off with the sky area because it's the lightest part of the background versus the foreground. So I'm going to just wet all of this top section above this line. You may decide that you don't want to do a background, so if that's the case, you can just skip ahead to the next section of the video. But if you do fancy working out how to have a go at this, you could even make it an abstract background, which is something easily done. Working with things like salt or cling wrap film, anything like that can work as a background as well. If you just want to do a solid colour for the whole thing, pop some pigment on and play around with some salt and things, but I will try to add some more tutorials soon about how that works. There we go. So that is all wet. Now you can tell that it's wet by just popping your head alongside the paper and seeing where it's glistening. As long as it's shiny, then you're definitely wet and you're good to go. So for your first colour, you're not just going to go straight into the paint and straight onto there, because this is going to be a very condensed colour. It's going to be really, really dense, really, really dark. And what we want to do is do a wash first. So we do that by taking a bit of our clean water and just dipping our paintbrush in there and adding it in. Now, as you can tell, it's repelling the water quite a lot in my palette because this is actually a new palette. My normal palette is quite large and bulky and takes up a lot of room on my desk, so I've just gone with this. So the consistency we're looking for, if you can see it mixing around in there, I'm just dipping in my paintbrush into the water and just adding it in. It's pretty much the consistency of tea. So if you ever spill tea and you see what it looks like on the surface of something, that's pretty much what it's like. Or coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I very rarely say coffee. So that you can see what it looks like, I've loaded my brush up with that, and it basically looks very, very pale, almost grey, which is one of the great things about lamp black. It's fantastic for this sort of thing. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go load up my brush with that pigment. So there's just all that pigment on that I've just mixed in this section here. And I'm just going to spot it about, because on this background it's not a flat background, like I say, it is trees actually that you can't quite make out. So it's almost like a mottled effect or a brindle effect. It's dark in some places, not so dark in others. So I'm just going to drop the pigment in and see what the water does. So the best thing to bear in mind when it comes to watercolours is they will always dry lighter. So if you want it to be really dark, you will have to go in really dark with the pigments. So I'm just using the one mix that I've done at the moment, and I'm just letting it have a play of itself. So as you can see, it's spreading out into the different areas. This is a technique called blooming, or I've heard it called blossoming before. It's not one I use myself, but I'm just popping some pigment on there. Bearing in mind this is one of the lighter areas of the photograph, so I'm not going to go in with really thick pigment, but I'm just going to pop it in and have a bit of a play. I've just picked up a bit more of the black there just to drop in. I'm looking at my reference photo all the time. That's probably a little bit darker than I would like. I'll bring my reference photo down here actually so that you can see what I'm talking about. I can move these around so that we're working here for now. And I'm just looking at where the slightly darker patches are. So I've got some around here and a little bit under this chin. And up in this corner. So that bit there was probably a bit too dark. That's fine though. And I'm leaving these white bits quite purposefully because I quite like them. The thing with watercolour paints is that you don't ever really paint white. White is always going to be the colour of your paper. So if you want it to stay white, it needs to not have any paper on it at all. Just going to bring that up under here because we can see there's a bit of that background just up there. And I quite like that. I'm quite happy with that. Now, if you're not happy with it, if you think, well, actually, there's a bit too much going on up there, you can get a bit of tissue, scrunch up the end like so, and just pick up a couple of pieces if you're not sure. I might pick up that a little bit there because it's a bit paler around his head. You could make it into clouds if you wanted to. Absolutely, you could. But I quite like that. And you'll see it's softened out and everything there, so that's actually really happy. That's all I'm going to do to the background. I am quite happy with that, all apart from this bit here. Didn't realise that was completely white, so I'm just spreading the pigment up a little bit more. There we go. So for the top background, I am more than happy with that. Quite happy. That actually looks quite like a little cloud, which I'm more than happy with. Cool. So I'm going to move on to the bottom section now. I'm just going to check if you can see this bottom section in the camera. There we go. Perfect. There we go. Brilliant. So now we're going to work on this bottom section, all this vegetation. So this is definitely darker, but it starts off pale. So same process again. I'm just going to take this and wet the whole bottom section. And you'll see it's quite a harsh line on that bottom bit there. I've just given it a little bit of a rub with my paintbrush and it's brought it up nicely. Now, the good thing with this tutorial, you may think I'm going super speedy. This is just so that I can fit in with the time scales that I've got going on at home at the moment. If I am going too fast for you, please know that you can pause, rewind, pause play, do what you need to. And this is the good thing about pre-recorded classes. You can go at your own speed. It's a little bit different in person, but for those of you who have come to one of my in-person tutorials, I do go a little bit slower than this, but if ever you find that I am going too fast, I can absolutely slow it down, and I only ever have enough people in there that I can still give one-to-one support to. So I'll always be able to come over and give you a hand at any point, so don't ever worry about that. So same thing again then. So this one, like I say, is a little bit darker, so I'm going to create another wash similar to how we did just. Pretty well, say similar, exactly the same way we did just. Again, it's quite patchy almost. If I was to look at the darker tones, we've got some darker tones here at the foreground, and then it goes off to a very pale one at the back. So I'm going to get the pale wash on first and then add in the darker tones afterwards. So I'm just going to go in That is probably a little bit darker, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going in, spreading it out a little bit. The foreground is probably going to be a little bit more controlled than the background that we've done. But I'm just getting, at the moment, some pigment on so I can see a difference between the foreground and that background further behind the zebra. So it's almost like I'm doing a complete wash, but I'm not being precious about covering the whole thing. Again, all using the lamp black, not changing it. And you'll notice I'm starting to go side to side with this, because that's the direction effectively of the landscape. It just helps me make it look like it's actually some ground going on there. So really happy with that, but it is blending into the sky a little bit too much of a similar colour. I may even end up putting some shrubs or anything back there afterwards. We'll see how I feel. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit more pigment from that black into here. I'm going to see how deep we're looking now. So it's a little bit darker than the tea coffee that we were looking at, a little bit more. And I'm just going to do what we did at the top, but this time I'm going to be focusing on all of these shrubbery areas. So it's a little bit of a shrub going on at the back, but I'm going to start here with this one. So again, because it's quite blurred out, there's no actual focus. That's probably a little bit too dark, but the thing is it will dry lighter, so I'm not too concerned. And all I can do is then take a bit from there and move it up to this section. So these are just little bits of shrubs that I believe were around as we were driving at this section. I've just taken some pictures in front of one of their gorgeous trees of a singular one on his own. And it's almost like this one looked up to see what we were up to, which is why I caught this picture. And then I'm going to do, hopefully you can see me pointing at this reference photo. So yeah, you start to see a little bit more roughage, is that the word, in the landscape. So this has definitely gone above my horizon line, which is fine because no one's ever going to compare the two together. I'm just going to add a few more shrubbery bits at the back. This is because this wasn't quite dry enough. Again, I am working quite quickly at the moment, but it's fine. I'm not concerned about that in the slightest. I've just raised up that horizon line. No one's going to compare the two together. So that's the joy in artwork. Unless it's a commission piece for a pet portrait, I'm not normally one for panicking about it looking exactly like the photo, because you can always have a photograph if you want it to look like the photo. This gives you a little bit of artistic license. I'm quite happy with that. Maybe a little bit more of a variant back here. Now this bit of the line it's not to my cup of tea, so I'm just going to bring my thin brush in, give it a bit of a clean because I was just painting with a different colour, and I'm just going to pop a bit of pigment on the brush, and I'm just going to start adding a couple of lines in just to hint that there's vegetation there almost. A lot of these will blur out or blend out. That's okay. I'm not too concerned. I will probably focus more at the front when it comes to detail, but when it comes to this back section, I'm gonna just, I'm not being precious in the direction because I don't want it to look hyper realistic. I am going to blend it out, so I'm just going over it with water now, just to add a bit of, so this is nice clean water. Now the top's dried a fair bit, it's not going to bloom, so I'm just breaking that line up so as it doesn't look like a solid line. And then I'm going to go back down here and just dip in into the pigment, and I'm just going to flick some of these up. just as a bit of foreground detail. And I say detail with a very, very loose term. It's still very, very blurred out. It's literally just to... And I'm doing it in different directions as well. It gives you a bit of a more organic shape. And it's almost like a tree, bushy bit there. There we go. I'm quite happy with that. I could work on backgrounds all day though, to be fair. And you never know, we may come back and pop a little bit more into this at the end. Brill. So that's all I'm going to do again. I might soften this line down here. This has gone a little bit too straight and not blurred out. So I'm just softening that by wetting the brush. And going back in with a bit of pigment. There we go. Again, if these lines come out too hard, just a nice clean brush. There we go. And if it's even harder than you'd like, you can just dab it up like so. That one looks like a fingerprint, so we'll change that one a little bit. There we are. That's it. It's nice soft now. Perfect. Just mix a little bit more in. You can even use mark making tools. I've got a plastic card that I use, which is great for indent making or line making. Especially if you're wanting to do some shrubbery and things like that. It's completely up to you. It's a great time to have a bit of fun with some backgrounds and have a play almost. You can even get brushes to rub areas out. It's completely up to you. Just pop in a bit in there. There we go. Blend that one out. Perfect. So really happy with that one. So the next thing to do is to have a look at our zebra. So the first inclination, or the first thought most people get, is to go straight in with the black stripes. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a very, very, very pale version of the black colour, and I'm going to pop in some shadows, just because once the shadows are in, the lines come second nature, so it's a lot easier. You will notice that I have coloured in, as I mentioned, some of these stripes in at the top. That's to give me a point of reference, or a landmark, so to speak, so that you can follow along the lines. You might find it easier to go along and actually just put a bit of a squiggle in every area of darkness so that you don't get confused. For instance, if I was to do that, I know that this one is going to be white and then that one next to it is going to be dark again. It's a great tip for if there's lots of different things like this. Again, it's a zebra. No two zebras stripes are the same. They're not even symmetrical, as many people believe, which is something I learned whilst I was out in Correca. So thanks very much, Brendan, for that tip. So yeah, they're actually, although they look symmetrical from behind, for instance, if you're looking at their rear, they look almost symmetrical, but you can see the differences if you look closely enough. So yeah, just pop in a squiggle in here, especially when we start to put some shadows in now. These will still show through, so we're not going to lose our way, so to speak. Perfect. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to do. So let's have a go. What I'm going to do now is go up to my larger brush, and I'm going to mix a nice decent size pool of the very, 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 very pale grey just in this well here, purely because it's a wash. The techniques that we've just all done are wet into wet, so I was using wet paint onto a wet surface. I'm actually going to use wet on dry now because my background is still a little bit damp. I don't want it bleeding out into that. As well as that, I've got a bit more control over where the paint goes when it comes to the shadows. It makes my life a little bit easier. So I'm just adding plenty of water here, and I want it really, really, really pale. You'll probably notice I'm not actually using too much of between the dirty water and the clean water because I'm using one colour. But always use your clean water for any wet laydowns that you need to do. So let's have a look. So that's a lot paler than it was previously. So I'm just having a look here at where I can see shadow. For me, I say this to all of my students that you may see something completely differently to myself because we do all see colour in a different way. For instance, I'm looking at this image and I can actually see quite a lot of pink. So if I was picking colours, that would be something that I look to make. Pinks and purples, absolutely. Even some burgundies going on in the top. Other people will look at it and see blues and darks and blacks and nothing else. That's absolutely fine. And this is something I try and teach, that whatever you see is true because it's a reflection on you. So I'm going to point out what I can see, but if you can see a different shadow, by all means include it, because that's what makes a piece unique, the way that we interpret things as we're going. So I'm looking here, and the first place I always look for creases is neck areas. Anywhere that there's limbs joining is usually where you'll find some shadow. So there's some shadow in here. There's quite a fair bit of a chunk of a shadow around this neckline here. Definitely here, and this section of the, is it a jowl? I'm not sure on horses. I'm not or equine animals, I'm not 100%. Definitely some shadows in this section here, and potentially along the base here of the mane. So yeah, let's go for it. Follow along, like I say, paint what you see, not necessarily what I see, but feel free to obviously, if you're not sure or you're still learning how to pick up on different tones, by all means just copy what I do. So I am going to pop in this neck one first. So again, very, very pale. It's obviously going to be a lot paler than the foreground, and you'll see that my colour isn't bleeding out. So I've just popped a bit of pigment on, and now I've cleaned my brush, just clean water now, and I'm just going to pull that out by going to the edge of it, and I'm looking at the image to see where these shadows go, and it's almost there, and then it comes down here, sort of teeters off down there like that. And that's all we're going to do. So we're just popping the shadows in. We're not even paying attention to the stripes at this moment in time. Remember, we never paint white stripes, but the tonal differences between the two stripes is what will make the stripes look white. So next, I've definitely got a shadow going through the centre of the neck here from around there. So I'm going to go like this, and it really goes off quite quickly there. So again, I'm going to soften the edge with just clean water, and that again goes up to the face, and that goes on to another shadow on the face, which I'm going to look at the moment. If you do struggle to see shadows, especially on animals that are monochrome like this, it's always worth turning the image black and white so that it can help you find those tonal differences. Just taking a little bit off there. Yeah, really happy with that. So now that's making this section of the neck look forward, and it's pushed that section back a little bit. And then we're going to go up to the head because there's quite a few creases. There's definitely a crease here at the back of the eye. So I'm going to pop that one in first. You may feel more comfortable using the smaller brush at this point. Myself, I tend to paint everything with this size brush regardless of size. Sometimes it's to my detriment, but I just feel comfortable with this brush. It's one of my favourites. It's a number 5. I don't even think it's any branded brush. It's one I was gifted. So there we are. That's a little bit thinner, so I'm just going to pull that out a bit. So then we've got the shadow going up to the behind the eye. And what else have we got? There's definitely some shade in here. So there's almost a line going down the jaw towards the nose. So I'm going to add that in, and it goes up towards that eye there. So I'm going to pop that in as well. Again, just softening off the side, cleaning my brush, and then I will soften off the other side, like so. And then it's just a case of looking out for all those other shadows. So there's definitely a shadow here and under here. And it's very, very pale what I'm doing, very pale, but it will make all the difference. That's really nice and smooth. I think we've got a little bit of a divot going on there. And there's definitely something going on down here for that shoulder blade, so let's pop that in as well. It's around there. And again, I've not changed the consistency or anything. I'm just softening it out. If I think I've put too much of the pigment on, I just use the clean water that I've got. You will notice I keep going off screen just to dab it off. All I'm doing is dabbing it onto this bit of paper when I feel I've got probably a bit too much water on my pigment. So I'm going to pop some shadows in here now on this muzzle, because he's definitely got something going on there. I'm definitely going to have to paint this one in colour at some point, because it's just got a gorgeous tonal range in the different colours. So let's have a look up here. There's definitely a little bit of something going on along this ridge here. It's ever so pale, but I'm noticing it, so I'm going to pop it in. Again, if you don't notice it, by all means don't include it if you can't see it. It is a variation of what you're seeing. And I think that goes all the way. There we go. And that is pretty much it, I think, in terms of shadow for the body. That is a really sharp line back here, so I'm just giving it a bit of a ruffle. Oh no, he has got one on his forehead as well, so I'm going to pop that in. So I'd say about there, almost like a triangle above his head. Over the brow. There we go. So this is almost giving you that bit of a variation. Now by all means we probably will add some more shadows in as we go darker with the stripes. That's fine, that's what we want to be able to do. That's just giving us basically almost a skeleton to work with. So first thing I want to work on is getting some paint into this section here. Again, I want this, because of this fade in here, I'm going to use wet into wet. So I am going to wet it with my brush with some clean water to begin with. I'll do that here. Now this is definitely dried enough, so if your background is still a little damp, probably hold off doing it straight away. The first layer I'm going to put on the muzzle is going to be that tea coffee consistency again, but we are going to start to go in with a little bit thicker paints in just a tick. So again, just using that exact same wash, and I'm just going to drop it into here for now, just to get some colour on there. I've gone right up to the edge where it's drawing in the water, the background rather, and I'm just pushing the pigment into the areas. This may look a bit strange here, but that's just because some of the background went into the muzzle. That'll look fine the more we do. So as you'll notice, I've not actually gone up here, but the water is pulling the pigment up here, which is exactly what I want it to do, because these do fade off into that there. And what I want that to do is to dry a little bit. I still want it to remain a bit damp, but I want it to dry to the point that it's a little bit more than there, purely because I want to start going in with some darker tones. And I'm going to do that with obviously some more of the black. But you notice I've not gone over here, I've gone into this little bit here. So this is a little bit thicker, probably creamy texture, I would say. Not butter, it's definitely not, you're not spreading it, but I would definitely say it's a lot creamier. So I'll show you what this looks like when this goes on. So this was tea when I popped this one on. This is going to be really, really dark in consistency, but that's actually gone on really smoothly, and it's what I'd call a cream consistency, just because it's a really, really creamy one. Now that is what we call wet onto dry, but if I was to go up to that now with a nice damp brush, it'll give me a nice blurred edge, which is the hope we're going to get for the stripes. It may be a little bit difficult because mine's quite small. The bigger you've gone, the easier you will find this, so it might be worth bearing that in mind when you are sizing these up. So yes, I'm going to move that now because I'm going to lean on it and make a mistake. I'll bring up that side in case I need it. Cool. So again, I think it's still got a little bit of dampness in there, which is fine. But because now we're working with a bit thicker, it shouldn't rush out as much. So to begin with, I'm just going to focus on this bottom jawline. So yeah, I'm just going to look at where the darkest areas are. And if I notice it starts running around a little bit too much, we're okay at the minute. If it starts to run away quite a lot, I'd stop. But I've popped that in. It's not rushing away, so it's nice and the right consistency. So the thicker the paint, the slower it is to blend out. So all I'm doing is just pushing that pigment into the darker areas of this mouth. So I'm just constantly checking the reference photo versus the image, and I think it needs a little bit more darker at this corner here, so I'm going to drop a couple more drops in of that creamy texture, and it's almost like a bump here that I seem to have missed, so I'm just adding that in. And then I'm looking at the shadow where the lip lines meet, and I'm just going back in on that lip line. Again, this is quite a sharp line, so I'm just going to clean my brush off with my dirty water, and with a very, very small amount of wet tip of that brush, I'm just softening that edge. Yeah, quite happy with that. Again, it might need a little bit of more work afterwards, but for that layer, we're fine. So, top end, let's have a look. This probably dried a little bit too much now, so I'm just going to get the tiniest amount of water on my brush and just dampen that area a little bit again. It is quite warm at the moment, so I am finding everything dampening out and drying up really, really quickly. And again, I'm just looking where the darkest areas are for that creamy consistency. So I'm going to start in the nostril and just pop a drop in there. Now I don't want it to go crazy, which is fine. That's looking like a little bit of a spider, but I'm just going to control it by wiping the back of that there, which is fine. And then I'm going to start deciding where I want it to be. So it's a very pale edge on this one. So I think we need some just underneath there, and it comes to here. It's almost like whooshing around it, like so. So that looks very, very strange at the moment, but as you can see, I've cleaned off my brush, and I'm just going back to the edges, just to have a bit of a soften with them, play them around. It's got quite a very pale lip here, so I'm going to try and keep that there, which is around here. And I'm going to push that down to round that off, because again, I said it's got that little highlight at the front there. It is just about focusing. Almost looks like a turtle head. There's his mouth and this is his eye. Yeah, sorry, I get very distracted. We're going to pop a little bit of that dark on that end. Now I've done it on the end because I want the nice contrast between the background and the zebra itself, but I'm just gonna, oh, a bit too much water there, soften that out. Pick up a bit more pigment, I think. There we go. There we are. Now this will definitely go darker, which I will do very, very last. I want to get the whole colour down onto the zebra, and it's going to be quite repetitive, but it's quite a nice, it's one of those pieces where it's a little bit colour by numbers in terms of what we're doing. So I'm just going to add a bit of darker in here. This is that cream texture. Now that's gone on quite thick, which is fine. I'm just cleaning my brush off, nice relatively dry brush, just a tad bit of water on there, and I'm just softening those edges out so it doesn't look like a solid, but I'm leaving that rounded bit there because that is creating that nostril quite nicely. And then I'm just going to soften that up there. This is a great sort of exercise for learning how to control your brush and how to control paint, because watercolour is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, medium to use, because you do lose a lot of the control, which is okay, but it's knowing that that's okay and it's accepting that that is what the pigment is going to do, which is what people struggle with the most. So I'm just going to bring this up here because this is where it'll start to bleed out into those areas up the top. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of that colour here. That does go all the way around like that. Again, this definitely needs to be darker, and now that's dry, I've just gone straight into the paint, just having a bit of a play with it. See, this is more like butter where it's not spreading out like this, so this filled it out because it was creamy. This is definitely more buttery, so it is really, really thick, and all I'm doing is just going over that jawline a little bit more. I'm just doing that, and that's it. Might be a bit hard, so I'm just softening that edge again, and I'm quite happy with that, and I'll repeat that process for the nostril when that's dried enough. So right now I'm going to soften these edges because this is quite a harsh line and it's supposed to be teetering off into each individual stripe. So I'm just softening that up. Again, I have gone up further than the image shows, but no one's ever going to see the two together, so I'm okay with that. I'm just going to pop in a bit more of that pigment there because it's faded slightly. Don't worry about the nostril will come back. I'm just popping in those bits that have bled out a little bit too much. There we go, just popping that nostril back in with a clean brush, so that we've got that nice light bit there. Brilliant. So now we get to do the stripes. Now, depending on how you feel about it, you might want to start with the larger stripes because they're easier, and then build your way up to the smaller stripes. It is completely dependent on you and how you think your confidence levels are going to be doing it, pretty much. So I'm going to show you firstly, I work left to right usually because I am right-handed, so I'd start on the left and work my way across, but these might be quite small to show you the techniques, so I'm going to show you from this section here, which is why I've coloured this one in so we know it's a dark one, and it's the section that runs behind the jawline here. So I'm going to start there and work my way down for you so that you've got an idea. So I'm going to mix up some pigment again. So I want some creamy pigment, but we want quite a bit. So I'm going to add a fair bit of water into this. I mean, technically this is like a tea mixture now, this dirty pot. So if I want some tea, I could just dip into there if I needed to. A little bit more. And for this, because the stripes are all different colours, even though each one is black, there's definitely lights and darks in there. So what I'm going to do is let the paint pick where that goes for me, because nothing else really is going to stand out really strongly on there. So what I'm going to do is take some clean water. I'm going to start on that one stripe. I've coloured it in, look, so that I know that is definitely a dark stripe. And I'm just filling it in. It's not a soaking wet brush, I've just done a line of water on there. Then I'm going to take some of that pigment that I've just mixed, and I know the line is definitely darker at the bottom because we've got it in the shadow, and I'm just going to drop it into that. You can see it's not rushing up there because it's not soaking. I keep doing this, I keep putting my hand in wet patches, and then my next trick will be to put it right on the top. So yeah, so yes, anyway, I'm dropping it in there, and I'm just looking at where the darker areas are. So it's definitely darker up here, so I'm going to drop some there as well. And then I want to join those two up because it's definitely paler because of you can tell where these stripes are that we put in here earlier. So I'm just wetting my brush and joining the two together. Now you'll notice I'm not stressing about it being a straight edge because no zebra stripe is completely straight. And I'm just seeing where those darker areas are in terms of my shadows from previous. So I'm just going to add a little bit darker into those shadow areas that I have done previously. So this is a bit darker, so I'm just going to pop a blob of paint there. And then this here is a little bit darker, but it's either side of that one stripe. So I'm just going to do that. And it's going to pretty much do the job for me, almost. So it's definitely darker under here as well. And if I find that it is drying too quickly and it's not doing the job I want it to do, so for instance this is quite sticky, this is blending out beautifully, this one's pretty much stuck in the mud, so I've just dampened my brush and I'm going to join both ends like so, and then the same again for that section. And that's how we're going to do the stripes, and that is pretty much it for the whole area of stripes. So I'm going to just crack on with them and see what you think, and then I'm going to do the smaller ones right at the end because there's not so many tonal changes up that area, but doing this section first will give you the confidence that you need to get up there and do that area too. So I'm just going to carry on going down. Like I say, it is great if you can pop a bit of shading on the darker ones, especially if you're not very confident in your painting skills. It just gives you that little bit of reinforcement. So again, I'm just looking at where those darker shaded areas are and dropping the paint there, and then I know it's definitely shaded under this section. Like so. And this is a nice clean brush. I'm just spreading that pigment up and bringing this pigment down so that they're joining. There we go. And you'll notice I've not gone into the mane just yet because I want to have a bit of a play with that afterwards. and that's where the little rigger brush will become really, really helpful. And the thing is that once we've done this section, we may find that the shadows that we put down initially may need to be a bit darker, but we'll know that at the end, because obviously everything dries a lot lighter. We shall see how it plays out. And as I'm going along, you'll see I've just gone back over all of those rows there, just to highlight that shadow again. And now I can see that it's going dark, light, and then there's the dark bit at the top, which I'm going to do when I do the rest of the mane in there. So I'm just going to, oh, I forgot to wet this one first. That's fine, I can spread that out as well. find once you get into the swing of it, you will speed up a little bit. Again, I've noticed that shoulder starting to dip there, so I've added some more of the pigment in just to show that shadow a little bit on there. And I'm just letting it do its own thing. Again, that's where that shoulder's dipping, so I'm just going to increase that shadow on this one so you can see that shadow almost going up that way. I'm just going to add a little bit into that section. Just bleed that out a little bit more. Mix some up again because I've used all my cream up. And as we get down to these ones down here, you'll notice that they are very more faded. So I'm going to make sure I take account of that. Pull that up there. Stripe here is still quite strong, so I'm going to drop that in. So I'm going to bear in mind that they all fade off on the left hand side. So what I'm going to do is paint some water onto those stripes. But I'm going to drop it in from the right hand side. Probably a bit too much water on that one. going to drop it in on the left and let it pull out. Now that's not going to pull out that much because I've just got rid of a lot of the water, so I'm just going to dampen that down so it spreads and fades off like that. So again, just going to wet the stripe, the whole stripe. Doesn't matter if there is a bit of pigment on my brush, that's not a problem. And then again, I'm going to get that creamy layer, dampen it from the right so that it fades off to the left. And again, if it's not quite getting there, help it along with a bit of that water. So it looks like those are fading off as they are in the image. So let's do some more down that leg. Again, I'm still using the same brush because I've got quite a nice tip on this. But if you're finding that it's getting a bit too thick, by all means use that smaller brush. I've done a few there at once. I'm just going to help them along a little bit with that fade. That bit out there. Just bring those all along. There. And in doing that, I can see there's a bit more of a shadow on there, so I'm just going to add another thin wash, so where that's really, really thin, just going to add that in there. Just for that leg. Lovely. So that's all apart from that one there. Missed that one. Just whack that one in there. That's all those stripes in for the back. So let's get the neck ones in next. Again, it's pretty much the same process as we've just done. All down the back, but now we're going to go forward. What I'm going to do though, before I do go any further forward than that, I'm going to do the ear. So to do the ear, we're going to do wet on wet again. So I'm just going to paint that inner ear all with water, and then take some creamy paint. And looking at it, it's almost like a straight line with lots of zigzags coming in. So I'm pretty much just going to go dab it is probably the best term, down the centre. Now that's got way too much on it, which is fine. I'm just going to sweep it up a little bit with a nice clean brush. Again, this side. Probably should have checked that first, but it's fine. We'll fix it. And then I'm just dabbing it in that centre section again. Now, it's going to do its own thing, which is fine. That's what we want it to do. But the detail, we can get in on that later. But I really like how that's going. It's giving hairs. It's definitely the right sort of route to be looking at. So I'm happy with that one. So, before I'm going to do that last. This is one of those things where I'm not quite sure. There's a little bit of blooming going on with this stripe here, so I'm just going to fix that. Just gone in with the black again and that cream consistency, and I'm going to blend those out so they don't look as harsh. like so. Like that. Yeah, happy with that. Okay, so easiest thing now is to turn it around and work upside down, because it'll stop me thinking that it's a zebra. It'll stop my brain thinking, I know where that goes, even though the image tells you differently. And it means that I'm not going to put my hand on wet painting. So I'm just going to flip it upside down. Exactly the same, just upside down. I'm just going to check that we're in frame. There we go, perfect. And we're going to repeat the process now, going from the left to the right. So I'm going to mix up some cream paint again. Could do with emptying my so-called clean water out. Let me just get rid of that. And then some clean. There we go. Just have a sip of this water myself. Wonderful. That's starting to stain that for some reason. Okay, so where were we? I've got my dabbing paper, and I've got my now clean water. So again, I'm going to go all the way along as we were doing. If I need to check what's going on here, I'll just use my reference photo with my finger. This blends down into that one, and then that's a bit damp. Focusing on where it's the darkest. Probably a little bit too much water on there, but it's fine. And it's definitely quite dark under here. Just joining those stripes up. Probably a little bit too much water on my first paint water lay down then. Just going in with a bit thicker paint. There we go. Just join those up like so. Cool. So just being wary of the stripes being a lot thinner now. So I'm not popping as much water on. Let's just join up to this one. And it's again, more copy and paste, more of the same. We're just going to work our way all the way down. Again, if you need to switch to the thinner brush, by all means do. These ones here are very, very thin, so I'm not even wetting the paper first. So for the tiny, tiny stripes, I've just got the creamy consistency black and I'm just painting it wet on dry, sorry. So it's the wet paint on the dry paper, because I've got a lot more control over it. And it's just allowing me to actually get the lay down quite quickly. With plenty of control. Again, if I need to add any shadows into the stripes, I can. I can always add them as I'm going. Or when it's completely dry, we can have a look at the overall layout and see if it needs rejoins. You'll definitely be seeing stripes by the time you finish this piece. Absolutely you will. Just straighten that up there. Okay. If you're not seeing stripes, you'll definitely be sick of seeing stripes. So I've used lamp black for this. You could absolutely use any colour you fancy. It's more of a tonal study, so as long as your tones are right, it will absolutely look like a zebra. So whether it's pink or blue, it will absolutely still look like a zebra. It'd probably look quite cool in like a pop arty colour. If anyone fancies a challenge, I would love to see it. So I'm just remembering that this is going under the chin, so that's definitely darker. That end. There we go. So you see how I've slightly darkened it in those shaded areas that we did originally? That really does help with those. So that's going to come. And I'm actually at the point now where I'm hitting those pre-coloured in lines that I've done, which is actually super helpful, because it does get a little bit chaotic in terms of stripes at this point. That's going into that eye. Not doing the eye just yet. I'll do that in a little while. There we go. Just add in again in those areas where, oh, it's too much on there. Where it's slightly darker, I've just gone that little bit darker by adding an extra bit of pigment in there so that we can see those highlights really coming through. this point I'm not too concerned that these are quite strong stripes going into the nose area, the muzzle area, because we will be deepening up the muzzle area, so I'm not too worried about those at all at the moment. I'm hearing things, honestly. I'm convinced there's someone in my garden. Very strange. Let's carry on. Funnily enough though, we did have someone just walk into our back garden the other day. It was a delivery driver who decided he didn't fancy ringing the doorbell. Thankfully my dogs went out. They're not aggressive, but if they see someone they don't know, that they definitely let you know about it. And because they're quite large dogs, I think they'd scare anyone. I wasn't expecting them to be there. There we go, nearly there. Famous last words. There we go, so that's everything under the chin done. I can see there's definitely a bit of paleness going on here where it's supposed to be quite dark in comparison, so I'm just going to drop a couple of darker bits of pigment in here. And if it's not blending out, I will give it a hand. I think the heat's starting to come over this side of the studio now, so it is going to warm up a little bit. We're nearly finished, that's fine. And out a little bit. That's actually really helped you see that nice light section of that muzzle. It's showing me that this needs to be a lot darker. So I'm just adding a bit of a wash, drop in some more of that really dark in there, just so that can do its thing for me while I move up here and finish off the top of this head before we get this back end sorted. So let's have a look. Lovely. So while I've got it this way, I'm going to get the rest of this nostril in, because it definitely needs to be a lot darker. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop a bit of a circle in where that actual nostril hole is, just going back in a little bit. And we need the rest of the darker areas to get as dark as this is. So what I'm going to do, clear my brush off, pop a little bit of water on. I have dabbed it so it's not soaking wet brush. And I'm just going to avoid that area that I've just popped in. So I'm going right next to it. I'm not going in it. I'm just spreading that water around, remembering that this is the section that it wants to stay quite pale in comparison. And then I'm going to get that nice creamy mixture mixed up again. I'm just going to drop some pigment in. That's probably a bit dark, it's fine. Just cleaned off my brush. And I'm going to spread it out with my brush. Join it up to those stripes that we've just popped in. Keeping that nostril edge clear. I'm going in here because this is definitely where it goes darker. Which I'm quite happy with, just like that. Pop a little bit of a smidge this side. Definitely needs just a little more of a drop. There we go, much better. Quite happy with that now. So the eye is pretty much just completely black. You can't really see much in there at all. So I'm gonna get a nice thick creamy bit and just fill in that eye section just for now. Because what will make the difference with that, apologies my neighbour's just popping out, is the detail that we can pop in after it's dry. So, oh no, sorry, that's not the kid, not my neighbour, that's my husband. Which means it's end of school, so that gives me 15 minutes to finish this off for you. So that's a challenge in itself. So that's the eye popped in as dark as possible. I'm just going to pop a little bit more of a wash on this ear just to add another darker tone into that section. So again, just a wet wipe with clean water over that ear, going in with nice creamy section, and I'm just dipping it into a line up that ear. It's not going to turn out exactly the same as the ear that's on there, but it's a bit abstracty, so that's what we want to get to. So I'm going to flip it back around now and have a look at these main areas. Let's have a look. And you can see I'm really starting to come together now. Let's check what in focus. Pretty much. Swap these over again. Now you could have done the mane effectively earlier on if you wanted to. Now obviously this section at the moment is quite flat because of popping in the background. If I was going to be a little bit more aware of that next time, I'd probably have brought this in, which in hindsight is a grain thing when you're painting, but you know what, this is how we learn. So I'm going to see if I can scrub a bit away from this edge of the background. Doesn't matter if it's going in with a bit of colour there, because it's going to be darker anyway. All of the lighter areas are down here, and it's not coming away, which is fine. In hindsight, I probably would have included these V shapes into the background. Didn't draw them in, so that's on me, but let's show you how we can fix that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to wet the whole of this area, even going slightly over the background a little bit, right down to the section where we've painted up to, wetting that entire area with just clean water to begin with. and we want to get that feeling of nice thick bits of hair leading up to nice thin bits of hair. So again, I'm not too concerned at this moment in time about the white, because although I've said you need to leave the white areas white for white, the optional extras of the white pen are fantastic for that. Now this is just a white paint pen. You can get white gel pens, will work absolutely fantastically for this kind of thing. So whilst this is wet, I'm going to mix up some cream of my black, a little bit more, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to dab some of this colour all along the back of his neck like that, and I'm going to let it have a bit of fun. Like, that is pretty much doing what I want it to do. It's starting to blend out, but now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my rigger brush and just pop a bit of pigment on it so it's not just wet. I'm going to move these because I'm going to end up flicking them, but I'm just going to start pulling out. Now none of these go in the same direction, so it's all about being very loose with it, very not natural's probably not the word, but it's like, although some areas of it do look pretty uniform, and don't be afraid of leaving these little white areas either. Yeah, some areas do look uniform on the back, but hairs don't all grow in the same direction, do they, realistically? So I'm effectively pulling up the pigment from that strip that I've just popped on. I'm just going to change direction a little bit there because it does on the back of his neck. To be honest, I'm not really paying attention too much to the image right now. There is a bit of a disjointment here, which is fine. We're going to neaten that up in just a moment. But I'm just having a look at the direction, and it's almost in sections of lines. But the white pen will help us out. So they are all pretty much the same sort of height, so I am trying to stick to a similar height with these. Just going in with a bit of a thicker. Again, we've got the dark pen for further detail as well, so don't stress too much. I think this bit has dried off, so I'm going to pop a bit more water on here. Get some more of that pigment in. And just start pulling that forward again. Twist it a little bit just to help my I actually really like how he's looking now. We're almost there. So I'm just going to get rid of that white stripe underneath from the background. I have just gone in, I've just added a little bit extra pigment to my brush, which you can probably see a darker shadow going on now, which is fine, not a problem. Now there's a couple of ways you could go out about adding the white in. Obviously I've not included these in the things like required for drawing this. It's just in case you ever wanted to go in a bit more detail or anything like that. White gouache is great, however it is quite translucent, so it won't give you white back. You would need to leave a bit more white available. The other one is something that I picked up again from taking the art retreat with Sarah. It's called Dr. Martens, I think it is. I will double check the name of it. But it's fantastic stuff, and it's just bleed proof white, and it's really, really nice and thick, and you can mix it with watercolours as well, which is fantastic. So yeah, really happy with that. Now let's get rid of this disjointed bit between the neck and the back. So not all of these do join up to the neck, because we've got some whites going in there, which I'm going to try and leave. But what I am going to do is join up the areas of black, which is things like this. So let's get a bit of a creamy texture going. I'm just going to join these up. Might need a bit more pigment on there to make it. And then this one. Some of these stripes, I'm just adding a bit more to them. In terms of tone, not gone all the way down, it just adds that bend. You can now see it sort of bumps in and goes in and out. Which is what we're looking for, because we don't want it to just appear flat. Last little bit here, and then we can get on to adding these white areas in. Lovely. Still looks a little bit disjointed there, because it's definitely not a flat line across the back of the neck, but we are almost finished. So I just need that to dry off a bit first. So whilst that dries off, I'm going to pop a bit of detail in up the front. Quick drink of water. Got my black fine liner. This one is a 0.5. It's quite a thin line, but it's great for detail, especially when it comes to things like, oh, let's clean my arm off, because we don't want that going all over. I always say to my students that I am a very messy painter, and I am. I'm not the cleanest, so I'm going to move that dirty piece of paper out of the way as well. So yeah, I'm just going to add a bit of detail in here. So anywhere I think needs a bit more, but to be fair, there's not many areas that would need it. Just adding a couple of these darker areas in where it's dried. To be fair, it doesn't really need, I mean, I could go around it in my own style. I do a lot of outlining and things, but I'm trying to stop doing that. Not because I don't like my style, but just because I'm trying to be more brave with my line making skills. So this is just where these little white areas are going to start to come to life. So we've got some off the back of this ear. Pop some some of these hairy bits. Definitely a line in there that I've missed, so I'll pop that in. Go around this way. And the good thing with these pens, there's an extra line I've just added there without needing to. Just go back in with water. Soften it right back again. I'm going to let that dry before I go back in with the white for that section now. I'm just going to come back here. If you were going to do this on like a mega scale, it'd probably be easier to leave these white bits white. But for the purposes of what we're doing today, this is a great way of learning mark making. And where we've got the join in there, I'm just going to go back in, because we did pop a bit of grey in there when we started, but it's not quite dark enough, so I'm just going to add a little bit more. Going back to the very, very pale, so that's not even pale enough. I'm mixing it on my paper because it's allowing me to check how pale. Just that sort of paleness. I'm just going to go back in. Add that in. That looks very strange at the moment, but I promise you it'll look fine in just a tick. Spread it out a little bit. Just going along the edge to break that up. It's just giving us that shadow then. Also, very important, get that white in for a catch light. On our zebra's face, zebra. And I'm going to add a little detail around here. Neaten up a couple of these. Like so. There's me saying I wasn't going to draw any lines. Force a habit, I can't avoid it, it's just the way I've always drawn. A couple of these wrinkles in here. Definitely a bit more shadow down here. This is me just being really picky now, and you might think actually I'm quite happy with where it is. Go for it. Just add a bit of shadow on that chest. There we go, much better. Actually, it's got a slightly rounder eye than I've given him credit for. I'm really happy with that. So if you wanted to, you could add extra lineage in the front, ground, that sort of thing. I'm actually quite happy with how he's looking, so I'm not going to bother with that. Really pleased with how that has gone. So the best thing to do now is to stop, because I will carry on. But no, really happy with that one. Again, you could make it look like it's got more clouds in the background when you're doing the first layers. You could do it in colour if you wanted to, using some indigos or even some purples as the low backgrounds. There's definitely lots of pinks in there that I can see. So best thing now to do is to peel it off. So always peel away from your piece, because you don't want to tear it. If it does start to tear, stop immediately. A bit of a heat gun or hairdryer is fantastic at getting those off. There we go. I have got a border around mine now. I could spread it out if I wanted to. It's completely up to you. If it's annoying you that much, you could always just add a bit of foreground in. But for me, that'll end up behind a mount anyway, so I'm not too concerned. But sometimes just making it monochrome makes it less obvious. So just getting rid of it. But better that than it end up stretching. So the only thing left to do then is to sign off your work. You may have your own signature, you may not. Completely up to you. I always use my initials plus, well, I say my initials, it's actually my maiden name initials. I've never changed them. So yeah, there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Like I say, it's run a little bit differently to how I would normally do it in class. This one is probably a good one for a home tutorial, because the stripes are very in-depth and they would take the majority of the 2 hours that I normally allow for my classes. But yeah, I've really enjoyed giving this one a go for you. So hopefully you like it. If you'd like to find out more about my classes, look out for any emails, or sign up to my email list to find out where I'm painting next. And of course, feel free to like and subscribe so that you can see when I do another free tutorial. So yeah, thanks ever so much for tuning in, and I hope I shall see you again soon. Bye guys.